What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the writing and directorial debut of actress Zoe Kravitz, simply titled Blink Twice. Directed by Zoe Kravitz, who wrote this film alongside E.T. Feigenbaum. This film stars people like Naomi Ackie, Aaliyah Shawkat, Adria Arjona, Channing Tatum, Christian Slater, and many, many more. So I just got home from checking out an early press screening for Blink Twice, which was a movie that I was pretty intrigued by. Just based on the trailers, it looked like a cool, suspense thriller. It had Channing Tatum at the center of it, being a charming kind of guy that we've seen in plenty of films where he plays that so well, but also playing a bit of a villain role, which was something that kind of excited me. And with Channing Tatum being in the news and all over online, trending in memes for his role as Gambit in the latest Deadpool and Wolverine, it's nice to kind of see a flip side to his acting not too long after. And of course, this film is the writing and directorial debut of actress Zoe Kravitz, who I've always really appreciated and enjoyed in plenty of movies. I think she's a really, really good actress. I've enjoyed her in so many things. So when I heard she was going to be directing her own movie, I was in. I was really excited. And outside of Zoe Kravitz behind the camera and Channing Tatum being one of the main stars of this film, I mean, you have a pretty star-studded cast of people here. I already mentioned some, but you have Naomi Ackie, Aaliyah Shawkat, Adria Arjona, Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Haley Joel Osment, and so many more. And I was really impressed by the stacked lineup of cast members that they have in this film, even down to the smallest roles. Now, what I'll start this off by saying is that I was really impressed by a lot of the filmmaking when it came down to this film. A lot of the cinematography, the overall performances, the locations used, the costumes that were used and settings, the overall aesthetic of the film, a lot of the set design as well. There was definitely an attention to detail when it came down to the way that this film looks and feels, and I think that Zoe Kravitz definitely had an eye for what she wanted this movie to look like right from the jump. And overall, the film is consistent throughout when it comes down to its visuals, and has an eerie musical score and ambient noise that adds to the tension of the overall film. So when it comes down to how the film was made, I was impressed, and I found it to be a really strong effort for a first-time director. Now let's talk about what the premise of this film is about, and I'm going to try to stay as vague as I can, but the trailers and all the marketing has pretty much showcased, in my opinion, a little bit too much of this film. I do think this is a film that has kind of been worked against by its marketing, because somebody like myself who goes to the movies often and has seen this trailer for this movie countless times already at this point, I feel like there was a part of my mind that just wasn't very surprised by a lot of the twists and turns in this film, simply because I think the trailer showed way too much. So if you have also seen the trailer for this film plenty, I think there's going to be a lot of moments that aren't as surprising to you because you're kind of waiting for them to come. But I actually spoke to one of my critic friends after the movie was over, and he was completely surprised by a lot of things in the movie, and he hadn't seen a trailer for it. He'd only seen the poster. So I think that if you're interested in this film and you want to go in blind, that's probably the best way to go about it. But for the sake of this review, let's talk on what this movie is all about, as vague as I can possibly get it. The movie opens and we're introduced to Naomi Akkie's character, Frida, alongside her friend Jess, Aaliyah Shawkat's character. The two of them are working as waitresses for a gala that is for a big billionaire CEO known as Slater King, played by Channing Tatum. And amidst this whole gala and this party, he ends up running into Frida and Jess and ends up inviting them to his big billionaire island, where him and a bunch of friends and some other girls are going to be going for the weekend, and they've heard that there are some big crazy Slater King parties. So they decide to go along with them, fly in a plane without really knowing who he is, other than the fact that he's a big social media presence and is a big known billionaire and is played by Channing Tatum. And so they go to this island only for things to start to kind of feel a little bit weird as the days go on, and the film eventually turns into a suspense-filled thriller. And that is all I'll say. I'll leave it at that. Channing Tatum is really interesting in this film because he gives a very charming performance like we are pretty familiar with when it comes to his character, incredibly likable for a lot of the runtime. But as things start to get weird on this island, it allowed him as an actor to kind of play things a little bit more dark and sinister, and the film actually had quite a bit to say. And I think a lot of the emotional weight and a lot of the strength of this film is actually carried on the back of our lead actress, Naomi Ackie, of course playing the character of Frida. I think she did a great job in this film, kind of showcasing the character's journey throughout the course of the film and carrying a lot of the emotional stakes on her shoulders. A lot of the facial acting that she has and small moments of nuance in her performance really sell a lot of the moments in this film. Outside of her, one of the actresses in this film who I actually didn't really realize was going to be such a big part of this film is the actress Adria Arjona, who plays the character of Sarah, one of the women who is coming to this island. And you know, the character Frida gets there with her friend Jess. If you've seen the trailer, they kind of reveal a little bit about the character of Jess, a little bit too much. But Sarah is this character that seemed like she would kind of be in the mix. She's a little bit jealous about the fact that Frida is getting the attention from Slater King that she wants. And over the course of the film, she becomes far more integral in what's going on here alongside Frida. And I thought that both of their performances were great. There are great moments of tension between the two of them, as well as some great moments of humor and charm. I thought that their chemistry was great throughout the course of the film, and they were probably the standout performances in this film for me, with Channing Tatum coming right behind them. And like I mentioned before, the film is star-studded. There's so many big names in here in smaller roles as well, and it was even cool to see somebody like Haley Joel Osment, who most people will always remember from The Sixth Sense, but I'll always remember as Sora from Kingdom Hearts. And as I already mentioned, I think this is a very well-made film. It really did have solid cinematography, those performances were solid, and all the other elements that you want to believe the world that you're watching were done really well. And I'm really got to praise the filmmaking team, everybody in front of the camera and behind the camera, for making this film feel and look the way it does. Unfortunately though, I do have some gripes, because while I was impressed with a lot of the filmmaking and I found there to be a lot of intrigue in the overall premise, and the film as an overall did keep me engaged, where I struggled with this film at times was with how some of these reveals happened. Throughout the course of the film, there are moments that felt a little bit abrupt and some things that did feel rushed. At times, once we get to this island, even though the premise and the trailers have sold you on the fact that things are going to go a little sour and things aren't necessarily what they seem when they first get there, it does feel like some of those revelations are a little bit too abrupt, that they just kind of happen randomly, and that our characters go from having a great time and feeling normal to completely kind of panicked or distraught fairly quickly. It's not overly aggressive with its abruptness, but there are a few moments where I felt like we're getting to a couple of things too fast, or the characters are kind of changing how they feel from one scene to the next. On one hand, I feel like the film also kind of explains that and does some things with its editing to kind of showcase how we got to those points, but at the same time, I think it did create a bit of a jarring experience where I didn't really feel like I was following a natural character development throughout the course of the film. But once the film does start to pick up, once some of this weird stuff in the film does start to play out, I found myself most engaged with the middle act of this film. That's where I found things were the most exciting. That's where I found the performances were the most engaging. That's where the story felt the most engaging. And I'm happy to say that as we got to the end of the film, I found that most of the finale was actually really satisfying. There's a lot of stuff that goes down that I think will have you rooting for the main characters of the movie. However, where I am a little bit torn on my overall opinion on the film is that while I am so impressed with so much of the filmmaking, while I can say that the middle chunk of the film was really great and there's so much satisfying stuff that happens in the finale of the film, I wasn't necessarily crazy about the last moment of the film. The way that the film actually ends as it leads into the credits, I understand what they were going for, but it kind of felt a little bit lackluster, especially based on how satisfying a lot of the finale had been leading up to those final moments of the film. So this is a movie that I think for me was a little bit of a mixed bag, but it's also a film that actually deals with a lot of heavy themes and subject matters that I do think this is a film that a lot of people are going to love a lot more than me, but I can also see this being a film that some people may not like as much as even I did. This is a film that actually felt fairly reminiscent to the film Saltburn, and while this film is wildly different when it comes down to its overall narrative, I am by no means comparing the two narratively. There was something about the vibe and the tone of this film and the absurdity at times, as well as the fact that our characters are dealing with excess when it comes down to drinking and drugs, that there was an element about this that sometimes reminded me of Saltburn, which was a film I enjoyed, but there were things about Saltburn that I didn't love that I felt like this film kind of shared. And so I really do think it's going to be dependent on your personal taste, on whether you enjoy a lot of the characters that are mixed in here and the events that unfold, because while this film does have a lot of suspense and a lot of different things that are kind of going on under the surface, There's also a lot of partying and some characters that do just come off obnoxious. It's meant to be that way, but I can see it being something that rubs certain people the wrong way or just turns them away from the film altogether. And now to wrap this up though, I do want to touch on some of those themes, because I think that this is where the film really does have its strengths, because I praised a lot about this film. I've had some gripes. I'm a little torn in other areas. I didn't necessarily love exactly how it ended, but I did appreciate Zoe Kravitz's message here, because the film has a lot to do with trauma and repressed memories and the idea of memories, whether we should forget something or not forget something that has tarnished who we are or who we will become. And I think that that was something really interesting that this film had to say. It also touches on the idea of apologies and the idea of forgiveness, and whether or not forgiveness is actually something that exists, or if we just all kind of forget. Is it truly a forgive and forget, or is it just a forget? And so I think the film had a lot to say when it came down to those things. In some areas in the film, maybe a little bit heavy-handed with the message, but I do think it also has a lot to say when it comes down to women, some of the societal norms that have been put on women, some of the pressures that are on women, maybe the idea that there are a lot of women who will come out and say something about somebody in a role of power, only to not necessarily be believed, to have what they say be discredited. And the film also kind of tugs on the idea of, you know, maybe women not necessarily believing each other sometimes within society, and kind of how that all plays out. So I thought that the film had a lot to say about societal norms, about forgiveness, about forgetting, about repressed memories, about trauma. And I think that Zoe Kravitz created a pretty intricately put together film here that I don't think lands in all areas. There's some pacing issues and some things that I didn't necessarily love. This isn't a film I'm clamoring to revisit, but it is a film that I can see myself revisiting in the future and possibly enjoying more. It was a film that actually impressed me a lot as a first-time director. I think this is a really ambitious story that really relied on a lot of story revelations to kind of recontextualize certain things and kind of flip certain things on its head, so that you have a different outlook of certain moments in the film as you get further into the movie. And that's not an easy thing to balance. I think that you definitely have to have a vision, and I think for the most part Zoe Kravitz nailed it here. I do think that this film is a really solid directorial debut when it comes down to her career. I look forward to seeing what she does next. I think the cast gives a great performance here. I think this is a movie that many will love, but I do think that there are elements about this film that may turn many away. So it's not one that I can give a flat out recommendation to everybody, but I think if you're a fan of ambitious storytelling, whether you're going to enjoy it or not, if you're a fan of filmmakers kind of taking risk with big stories that have a lot of themes and try to create something that's creative, I think that you're really going to enjoy this film. But again, I think if you are somebody who goes to the movies often and keeps up with trailers, and you've seen this trailer as many times as I have in front of other movies that have come out in the last few months, then I think that the trailer is going to do a disservice to you, because there was that part of my brain that was just kind of checking things off of a list, because I remembered everything that the trailer had shown me, because I'd seen this trailer dozens of times at this point. So yeah, you know, I really hope one day we move away from marketing that shows everything in the trailer. I like the idea of being able to see the basic idea of the film, maybe see a lot of the film visually at times, but not necessarily all the story revelations, which I do think that the trailer showed a little bit too many of those story revelations to kind of get the audience hooked in. But I do think it does a disservice to anybody who saw the trailer and is like, oh, I really can't wait to see that, because there's a lack of surprise at times simply because you know it's coming. So that's gonna be my thoughts on the movie. Very, very curious to hear all the various opinions on this one. I think this is gonna be one that has some divisive opinions from different people, and I definitely want to invite all of you guys to let me know down below. Did you like Blink Twice? Did you not like Blink Twice? Obviously this review is going up ahead of its release, so if you're watching this before the movies come out, are you planning on checking this film out? Are you not planning on checking this film out? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.